Mental health is not optional for entrepreneurs. There's a lot of good advice about persistence. If you fail, get up and try again. About discipline, stick with it, and and the importance of networking, about getting out and meeting people and making connections, making deals, and so on. But each one of these has a flip side, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those today. And as some context, I'm wearing my Gox shirt. I'm going to be talking about a business I launched, one of the first Bitcoin businesses. And Mt. Gox, for those of you who don't know, was the first Bitcoin exchange. And they ended up stealing about $250,000 at the time from us, which we never recovered, and the business never really recovered from that. So, why did this come up with me now? I'll give you a little story. A couple days ago was my birthday. One of my old business partners reached out to me, wished me a happy birthday. And I had these feelings come up. And I felt bad. And I didn't really know why. Because I hadn't been perfect. That business, we ultimately sold it off, and the customers and employees and everyone was made whole. I lost some money and so on, but it wasn't, on paper a big failure, right? And I didn't have a particular conflict with this person. In fact, everything had always been pretty friendly. So why did I feel bad? I realized upon reflection that it was just the weight of the responsibilities that I'd carried, the self-judgment that I'd carried, that I still hadn't released, that I was still carrying around all these years later. And it's still affecting me. I felt like a failure in that moment. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with imposter syndrome. And I'm on the point of launching a couple of new projects. But honestly, things like this are holding me back. Feeling like an imposter, feeling doubts, like, oh, it's not going to succeed or something like that. And so this event that happened a decade ago is holding me back today. And this is just a really obvious kind of impact to me of mental health on entrepreneurship. Most of the entrepreneurs that I know are familiar with the concept that 80-90% of businesses fail in the first year, and you got to get back up and try again, and so on. But they don't treat themselves like a human. They don't value their nervous system and their mental health as a part of their performance. And if you just get back up and try again without actually processing the feelings, it's going to affect you going forward in very subtle but very important ways. You may find it difficult to launch the next thing. You may find you're making poor decisions, or your decisions are not as clear. And so, it's really important. Yes, it's important to try again, but it's equally important to clear away the old before you bring in the new. And most of the let me take a step back. So, another thing that stands out to me from that business was that I told you that all the employees and the customers and everyone was made whole, but I was not. I lost 90% of my savings and poured them all into this business. As an early Bitcoiner, I could have been very rich, and instead I people pleased and overcommitted and overgave. And that was really one of the first mistakes that led to the downfall of this business. on my part, and I'm taking accountability and learning from my mistakes here with you. Obviously, we got doxxed. Other things happened that weren't under my control, but as I reflect, that's something that I do take accountability for. And so that brings up this concept of discernment, and when we talk about networking and your mental health as it comes to people, yes, networking is important. You got to get out there and meet people. You got to make connections. But equally important is discerning who to do business with, who to employ. And a lot of it comes down to character. And, one of the things I've learned is don't do business with cheaters. If someone cheats on their spouse, don't do business with them. If you catch somebody stretching the truth, don't do business with them. Another piece of advice a lot of entrepreneurs follow is like, fake it till you make it. And again, like all these things, there's some truth, there's some balance, you got to act confident and so on. But if it's to the point where you're lying, someone like me who has this experience is gonna catch that immediately and be like, I'm not doing business with this person. Authenticity and trust is so critical, because it doesn't matter what the potential of a relationship is. It doesn't matter how much money you could make through a partnership or how good an employee could be on paper if they're ultimately going to betray you or simply fall through, overpromise or something like that, as I once did. I used to overpromise and overcommit. And similarly, I lacked the discernment to notice that in other people. And I made deals and hired people who I shouldn't have. And I mentioned that this business got hacked. It very well might have been one of our employees, which again I take accountability for, at least not having had the discernment to make better decisions. That I even doubt that to this day. It's something that I need to be accountable for. So yes, get out and network, but use careful discernment in who you do business with, who you take money from. One of our investors turned around and tried to sue me as I did this, and it was a VC, and we had a 30-page contract about employee compensation, and I stuck to my guns. Like, look, no, everything I did as CEO was legal in accordance with our agreements. And ultimately, they tried to threaten me, they tried to intimidate me, but it didn't work, right? Because I was right according to the contracts, which is always be right. If you're an entrepreneur, you better be an amateur lawyer, right? Especially if you're going to take VC money. But everyone you think, everyone you do business with has the potential to turn on you at any moment. Employees, investors, anyone. And so you better make sure that you at least trust that they're a good person, that they're authentic, that how they're presenting themselves is how they're going to continue to show up, so that you can figure that out and you're not always watching your back. Another part is a hustle culture. You just push. I've watched entrepreneurs literally push themselves to death. I've seen so many of my colleagues push themselves to the point where their bodies are degrading. At one point, this was me. I had swollen lymph nodes all over my body, things like this, and some of them have literally died. One of them died of COVID. Other ones have died of other things. But you can't win if you're dead, and there's no point in winning if your body's destroyed. Yes, you got to hustle, but if you're miserable or if your body's falling apart, it's not worth it. And a lot of times we get caught up in, it is like a competitive culture, especially with the fake it till you make it. You know, everyone wants to look so successful, and they push themselves past the point of reason because everyone else is pushing themselves past the point of reason, and it's bad for everybody. And if you can stand up for yourself and do what's right for yourself, the people that matter will notice. Again, like a person like me who's considering doing business with you, or an investor with experience, will say this person's not going to burn out. They have staying power. So, yes, work hard, but know your boundaries, know your limits, and don't be afraid to set them and enforce them, and take care of yourself so that you can sustain it. You know, I could go on and on about this, but the video is already getting pretty long. So, you know, I'll just use these examples that, you know, every time something happens and you don't allow yourself to process it, it affects you going forward. The next time you meet somebody, you're not going to come off as honest, or you're not going to be able to discern whether they're honest, or you're going to feel inadequate in some way and not make a deal, or not launch a business that could be wildly successful. And as entrepreneurs, we absorb all these hits to our mental health. We take on all this responsibility, and it accumulates over time. And we need to take time regularly to clear out all that garbage, to ground ourselves and be able to move forward in a balanced way, with a balance of discernment and networking, and a balance of self-care and hustle, and a balance of accountability and ambition. So, good luck to you all. Thank you for listening.